Economic data out of China this week has proven to see an uptick in exports and imports in the country and a slight uptick in inflation. Here to talk about that and other things of China with us today is Tim Beardson. Tim, thanks so much for being with us.
It's a pleasure. It's nice to be here.
So Tim, we look at the economic data coming out this week. It looks a little bit better than expected, although China has been weak. I mean, what do you make of the short-term information we're seeing?
Well, the first point I'd make is that the data in China is very frail. You've only got to look at the revisions that happen time and time again in the subsequent years. It's tough to be a trader because what you're responding to is something that you know is going to be changed later. Also, in the long term, China is on a downward trend in terms of economic growth, but any quarterly data could be up, down, sideways, anywhere.
So how do you mean they're on a downward trend in the long term?
The principal reason is China faces a huge demographic challenge. It really takes four forms. The first is that the labor force, which was growing for a long time and therefore wages stayed flat, is now falling and wages are rising at double digits. That's breaking the economic model of China as a low-cost manufacturer. China's got to find another future, which essentially needs to be innovation-driven. It's not doing that very well. The second problem they've got is China's an aging society. It's going to treble the number of people over 65 in the next 20 years. That puts a huge pressure on China's budget. The third thing is that the gender disparity, 6 boys born for every 5 girls for the last 20 years, means the potential for instability and for crime looks quite grim, looking out a couple of decades. And the last challenge is that by 2027, China's population will have peaked and start to go down. For every forecast you can imagine for how far it's going to go down, the most cautious is that it'll fall by 1/3 by the end of this century. The worst is it'll fall by 2/3 by the end of this century. And no society in history that has actually had a falling population has actually had sustained high economic growth. So the argument I make in the book is that you can't see China beyond the next 20 years growing rapidly. China has to do everything it needs to do now.
And in your book, Stumbling Giant, you approach the question of as to whether or not China will be the next so-called superpower. The general question is, do you believe that China will become the superpower as we may know it in the West or the United States?
Well, the first point I make is you can only have one superpower. You can have lots of powers, but there's one superpower. America was a superpower. Arguably, there really isn't a superpower today. China isn't going to become the superpower. The education system doesn't work properly. Innovation isn't working to make the economy technologically driven. Demography is going to make the country a reducing population. None of these things are conducive to becoming a superpower. So China just isn't going to get there. If it made huge reforms and made them early and radically, it might just keep the growth going longer. But the signs are that those reforms aren't really happening.
And a final question, maybe people who are a bit more familiar with China as it pertains to economic development. What about the disparity between economic development in urban areas and the countryside?
Well, the average income in the urban areas is 3 times the average income in the rural areas. And in fact, the income disparity across China overall is now higher than it is in America, which is extraordinary when you think that a lot of people still see China as a socialist country. Actually, income inequality is more pronounced than it is in America. And the thing about America is that we talk about the opportunities, about entrepreneurship. They talk about socialism. And if you talk about socialism and you deliver income inequality, you create unhappiness and instability. That needs to change.
Well, Tim, I wish we had more time. This is a great topic. There's so much to it. Thanks for being with us.
Very nice to be here. Thank you.
I'm Deaux, The Street.